Well, welcome everybody to Deep Dives with Dr. Dorsey. My name is Dr. Matt Dorsey. I am the Chief Scientific Officer and formulator for CHOQ. And today we are doing a deep dive into everything ashwagandha, all of the science. I have an amazing person here. His name is Dr. Anthony Thomas. He's the Director of Scientific Affairs for Natreon. And they supply our max dose organic ashwagandha. Dr. Thomas has a PhD in nutritional biology, and he's a wealth of information. Every time I meet him, he's one of the few people who actually teaches me new stuff. So, Dr. Thomas, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be awesome.
Hey, Matt. Really excited to be speaking with you again.
Yeah, for sure. And tell us a little bit, if you'd like, just about your background and kind of, what brings you to the world of herbal research.
Well, my background is extensively in nutrition. I have my PhD in nutritional biology, which I got at Davis, and I did a lot of research focused on dietary interventions to mitigate issues associated with obesity development, such as cardiovascular dysfunction and glycemic dysregulation, so elevated blood sugar, glycemic variability. And then I found myself at UCLA doing postdoctoral research in the world of diabetes prior to making the move into the dietary supplement industry in 2015. I was previously with a finished good manufacturer. Some of your customers may know Jarrow Formulas. I was their scientific director, but had made the jump over to the ingredient supplier side and am now the chief scientific officer at Natreon.
Great, excellent. Oh, that's your new your title as of now, chief scientific officer, much like myself. So, excellent, very cool. Okay, so we're gonna do a deep dive in ashwagandha. There's so much to cover. There's an insane amount to cover. So I was reviewing the research. I have an insane number of studies here on my desk. This isn't even all the studies that's on this ashwagandha. I believe it's 14 now on this ingredient. Is that correct?
15 and counting.
15. Okay, 15 studies on this ashwagandha. As far as where to start, I thought I would start with one of the most relevant things here, which is this phrase right here. I know it'll be backwards for the audience, but chronically stressed humans, the title of this particular paper, when I read it, it looks like a 2008 paper from JANA. Chronically stressed humans, that describes literally everyone in the last year and a half with all the things we've been having to deal with as a society. And so that explains why ashwagandha's popularity has just exploded recently. Does that seem to be the case as far as you know?
Honestly, ashwagandha has been on an upward trend since about 2015, but it is exploding now, and that's because, just like you said, on top of everybody's, concern list, stress, and then issues with sleep, as well as immune health. And of course, ashwagandha, good for all of those things, and people are looking for natural relief, and ashwagandha is a good option for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to do, I think part one of our deep dive, I'd like to really get into stress chemistry. As a lot of people know, stress hormones like cortisol tend to affect a lot of different systems, and when those levels are kept healthy, then it can have a massive impact on your vitality across the board. Tell us about ashwagandha and healthy stress levels. What is it doing for us, and why is that important?
Well, I think it's good to put things in context, like you said, and just review the stress response so people understand why it's important, but also why it can be detrimental when evoked too often or there's not enough resolution. So, as you mentioned, cortisol is kind of the culmination of the signaling cascade of a physiologic acute stress response. And what happens is you activate what they call the HPA axis, or hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And so you have hormones produced at the level of the brain that function at the level of the pituitary gland that then circulate, act on the adrenals, and the end result is secretion of cortisol, as well as what we know as catecholamine. So epinephrine, norepinephrine, or more commonly known as adrenaline or noradrenaline. And so what do these signals do in the body? Well, they prepare the body to face a perceived, existential threat. So they'll elevate your heart rate. They'll increase your blood pressure, so cause your blood vessels to constrict. They basically want to reprioritize bodily functions to increase your odds of survival and be able to either fight the threat or run away from it. And so you have to deprioritize physiologic processes like digestion. Not very important if you're running away from a saber-toothed tiger, if you think from an evolutionary standpoint. So
sure, wasted energy.
Exactly. Yeah. And so all of this, it's basically governing, it's optimizing your body's functionality to survive. And of course, you need resolution to this once the threat is mitigated or no longer present, or else it's going to lead to health problems. And just to give people an idea, prolonged elevations in cortisol or chronic stress, as we started, will result in your blood sugar and lipid levels will rise. You'll gain weight, particularly fat in the belly region, which is associated with the greatest metabolic risk. And there's you lose lean body mass, skeletal muscle, depressed immune function. Your heart rate is chronically increased.
Okay, so give me a list of the top 3 or 4 or 5, let's say, reasons physiologically that you want to keep cortisol in check. Which are the systems that it can most profoundly affect, and the areas of health and vitality that could potentially sabotage if it's not kept in check?
It really affects every system in the body to some extent. And, what comes to mind, I would say, is your central nervous system. We know it affects mood, the ability to focus, your energy levels. You feel fatigued a lot. Of course, right now, a major concern is immune health. And, cortisol is used clinically as an immunosuppressant, right? It's to suppress immune function. So sure enough, if you have elevated levels prolonged in the system naturally, it's going to suppress your immune function. It also leads to, metabolic dysfunction. So we do see elevations in blood sugar and blood lipids, which of course can exacerbate other metabolic issues over time. And so,
sure.
Everything is linked in the body, and it has this negative effect on various body systems, which of course will propagate and further exacerbate the problem if not resolved.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you mentioned central nervous system. I always like to give, when I'm, teaching people, clients and friends and other people about the effects of stress hormones on your mind, I always give the example of being hangry, right? and so, I just tell people, just to kind of simplify it, there's almost like a blood sugar thermostat, right? And once you go below a certain set point, then your adrenals are going to have to help your body switch back on production of new glucose, and part of the way that does that is through stress hormones, right? And I know, cortisol can liberate amino acids from muscle tissue and then convert it to glucose, things like that, right? And so that's one of the reasons we feel hangry. It's a side effect of our body trying to bring our blood sugar back up. And what's happening is, as far as I have been told, and correct me if I'm wrong, that neurologically, your higher reasoning centers, more frontal lobe, they're given not nearly as much juice, right? And then you're processing in terms more of your hindbrain, in terms of your survival circuitry, in a sense.
I can't confirm that necessarily, but it sounds right from a biological standpoint. And just so everyone remembers, cortisol is referred to as a glucocorticoid. And gluco, you can imagine the word glucose.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's reprioritizing your body's energy metabolism. And so it wants to encourage your liver to make sugar, i.e. glucose, because glucose is the most efficient fuel source your body has. And, and you want to but of course, in most everyday people, it's elevated blood sugar is not so good. We don't want our liver constantly making more sugar to contribute to the system. We have sugar and nutrients coming in through our diet, so we don't need the liver to make extra sugar for us right now. So you can imagine,
of course.
We don't, that's basically like a miscommunication within the system, so to say.
Yeah, and I know, adaptogens like ashwagandha can help with healthy muscle mass, and I would think that reducing cortisol's liberation of amino acids from muscle tissue, might be part of that effect. Would that make sense physiologically?
Absolutely, that's 100% correct. So we know that it's catabolic to skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle is kind of low on the totem pole of priority when it comes to tissues, and there's no real reserve of amino acids in the body. And people forget amino acids can contribute to our energy metabolism, just like fat and carbohydrates.
Sure.
And so, like you said, cortisol is gonna liberate amino acids from skeletal muscle, i.e. break down skeletal muscle. So you can imagine over time, if it's promoting fat accumulation, particularly in the belly, and it's discouraging lean body mass, that's going to have a negative impact on your body composition, which we know has a negative impact on your cardiometabolic health over time.
So stress makes you fat, weak, and stupid, basically, is what we've established so far. And adaptogens are a godsend, I think. I've got a couple studies here on this ashwagandha that do relate to cognitive function. And since we're on the topic of nervous system, I was going to ask you, so I've got one study here, effective standardized aqueous extract of Withania somnifera on tests of cognitive and psychomotor performance in healthy human participants. This one's cool. I've got another one here that also had some outcomes such as auditory working verbal memory, measure of reaction time, and social cognition. And I'm wondering how much of these improvements in cognitive function are due to its effects on stress hormones, and how many of these effects do you think are due to other things such as antioxidant cascades and maybe even direct effects on neurotransmitters?
Yeah. So again, this is going to be some presumption on my end because some of these studies didn't adequately address that question as far as discerning, what component stress might have played in it. But I think it plays a major role. Like you said, ashwagandha is considered an adaptogen. In Ayurveda, it's classified as what they call resana, which is probably kind of like what we think of today as an adaptogen. And so it has broad therapeutic potential, but a lot of that is surrounded, like we said, around the body's stress response because, prolonged elevations in stress and these stress hormones like cortisol lead to imbalances in metabolism. And those need to be resolved to restore health. And we've already talked about why that can lead to dysfunctional health status. And so adaptogens, as the name implies, helps the body adapt to stress and restore normal physiologic functions. And so, at least at the lower doses, generally starting at 125 milligrams for our branded sensorial extract of ashwagandha, we see this stress reduction and improvements in some of the associated symptoms and metabolic biomarkers. And this seems to be a little bit of a dose response. Some of those studies you mentioned were actually acute studies, relatively speaking. They were only a couple weeks long.
Right. And 14 days, right.
Right. And they used a relatively high dose, I want to say maybe upwards of a gram. And you saw these improvements in recall and reaction time, but that was in an otherwise healthy population. So not a population even self-characterized as chronically stressed. So I think with regard to acute effects, maybe with some higher doses, you might see direct cognitive benefits. But I do think a lot of the benefits will manifest over time as you balance out your hormones and that stress response, which will allow you to do things like sleep better. And then, of course, you'll have more energy and be able to focus. Your mood will improve. And this has beneficial effects all around. And so I think you'll see the bulk of the benefit coming from the prolonged use and balancing out those systems.
Sure. I sometimes refer to the amount of time it takes to get at least some kind of noticeable results as like a down payment when I'm coaching people, and I think 2 weeks is not too bad of a down payment, like as far as just your initial investment of having to remember to take the thing every day just for 14 days and then getting results is pretty excellent. This particular study was only on 500 milligrams. This one at the 14 days showing these cognitive improvements. And I'd like to note also that the CHOQ Ashwagandha, this one is a 600 milligram and it's an organic as well. And just on a side note, many of the sensorial-based products out there are not the organic version. So we, of course, because we had the option, we went with organic. But we picked 600 milligrams because we wanted to match the research on a lot of the 500 milligrams ones and then, add a little bit extra just in case. So we do have the most potent out there out of the organic sensorials that you can find anywhere. But yeah, so a lot of these effects do seem to be due, cognitive effects do seem to be due, as you said, to assisting with healthy cortisol levels. From a neurotransmitter perspective, I have to admit, I did a fair amount of research. I didn't get as deeply into direct effects on neurotransmitters as I would have liked. I did find some evidence that perhaps it might work on acetylcholinesterase. But I don't know if I dove heavily enough, and this is just ashwagandha in general, not maybe sensoryl specifically, but have you found any research on that, on boosting acetylcholine levels?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to direct effects on various neurotransmitters, acetylcholine, which is very much associated with cognitive performance, memory, that it may increase levels of acetylcholine in the brain or central nervous system, one by preventing its breakdown, so keeping levels higher longer. Another neurotransmitter that I've seen implicated is GABA, or gamma aminobutyric acid. Now this is what's commonly known as an inhibitory neurotransmitter, kind of dampen down activity of the central nervous system. Right. And ashwagandha may also help promote GABAergic signaling. And that may seem counterintuitive. Hey, there's acetylcholine, which kind of stimulates, promotes that cognitive performance, and you have this inhibitory neurotransmitter. But I want to remind everybody, things in the body are not like on-off switches. These things are usually going simultaneously, and it's the relative abundance of both of various signals in the body, right? So you don't want too much stimulation, or else it's going to be difficult to concentrate and focus that attention. It's kind of like think of guzzling a lot of caffeine, and what's popular now is to combine caffeine with ingredients like theanine, which might help take that edge off of the caffeine and really improve focus. But lo and behold, that's what ashwagandha helps do too. And so it's common as far as a popular combination with caffeine now.
Yeah, people always think of, they associate focus and cognitive function with stimulating things, with being more amped up. But at a certain point, like you were saying, if anybody's ever had like more than 3 shots of espresso, unless that person is just a hardcore caffeine addict and can handle it, most people, it will actually destroy your focus, because you'll be completely inattentive. You'll be darting from one thing to the next, right? Because at that point, you're overloading yourself on probably adrenaline and noradrenaline, and you don't have enough GABA to compensate for that, right? Or some of the other inhibitory or neurotransmitters. And GABA is a really big deal. I just like to add as an aside here, because our audience is really interested in protecting themselves from a lot of the toxins that you tend to find in the environment. One of the ones that's really on my radar as a practitioner is mercury. And interestingly enough, a chemist named Boyd Haley a while back was doing experiments with mercury, and he figured out that mercury can actually knock out glutamic acid decarboxylase, which for those who don't know, which maybe not super well-known information, but that's an enzyme that converts glutamate to GABA. Glutamate is, one of your excitatory neurotransmitters. GABA is the opposite, right? Inhibitory, as Dr. Thomas was saying. And so what happens then? So, we do know that, mercury tends to have pretty negative effects on the personality and the brain and emotions and things like that. One of the mechanisms by which it's doing that is it's knocking out this enzyme. It's disabling this enzyme that converts that converts a yang neurotransmitter, such as glutamate, into a yin neurotransmitter, such as GABA, right? Obviously, with my background in Chinese medicine, I think of neurotransmitters as yin and yang, and so long story short, we have overexcitation, we have excitotoxicity in the brain. And increasingly, it's a really big deal. Everyone right now is looking for things that can push GABA. And one of the ways of doing that is to also, reduce your intake of toxins like mercury, over time, right? So that's why, for example, pregnant women are, told not to eat a lot of tuna, things like that, right? Because really bad for the developing child's brain and everything else. But yeah, so, detoxification, we have a product that's going to relaunch pretty soon in a couple months here, or perhaps when you're watching this already out, called Apex Glutathione. I formulated that to be an excellent detox product, a glutathione-based product, but at the same time, it also does help to increase GABA and works to reduce glutamate at the same time, knowing that some of these toxins actually can interfere with those neurotransmitters. But that's a great segue into, and I'd love to come back to the neurotransmitter cognitive stuff because that's so much fun, but into the detox element of ashwagandha. It's not maybe its number one selling point, but it is interesting. I have a few studies, like if I can find in this giant pile of studies here, I found a few studies in general in ashwagandha showing that it can activate NRF2. It has some effects on glutathione. they might be, they might not be profound effects, but I have found that, and that's, part of its antioxidant function is working on that pathway. So I'd love if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. We have a number of ingredients available, right? And they've been tested in vitro, within cell culture for their antioxidant activity. And we have some incredibly powerful ingredients when it comes to antioxidant power. However, sensoral ashwagandha is about the lowest on that totem pole among all of our ingredients, and yet it has these profound effects on your endogenous antioxidant defenses and detoxification pathways. And you mentioned that key signaling pathway, NRF2 activation. So this gets activated when cells are under oxidative stress, right? If there's too high a xenobiotic load, or xenobiotic just means like a foreign compound. So the body wants to eliminate these foreign compounds from it, right? And by activating those pathways, you see upregulation in antioxidant defenses, including glutathione production. And you also see upregulation of enzymes that participate in detoxification of the cells. And so even in our own clinical research, we see that when we measure reduced glutathione, which is the body's primary endogenous antioxidant and detoxification agent, we see that treatment with the sensoral ashwagandha increases levels of glutathione. And then we also see reduced levels of say, lipid peroxidation, things that would support the notion that sensoral ashwagandha supplementation is in fact supporting your body's internal antioxidant defenses, even if it's not necessarily a direct antioxidant, something like a vitamin C or vitamin E, right?
Sure. Yeah. I came across a study earlier saying it protects, ashwagandha protects against methoxyacetic acid, a metabolite of a common industrial solvent called EGME, ethylene glycol monomethyl ether. And it's interesting, you'll find these studies where, unfortunately these poor rats, they'll give them something really nasty, and then they'll just try to see, hey, does this herb protect them against this horrible industrial solvent metabolite or whatever? Anyway, I thought that was an interesting one. And it just hammers home, the point that, we live in a very, very toxic world, unfortunately. If you look, I don't remember what the number is, but the number of novel compounds that have been created in the last 100 years is absolutely mind-blowing. And I really think it's important to note that the kind of safety testing done on a lot of these chemicals may not be as thorough as we would like, particularly, when they accumulate in your body over decades and they all combine together, right? So detoxification, we could use all the help we can get, basically, I really feel like. So even if that's a minor aspect to ashwagandha, I think every little bit helps. And also, I'll just like to refer people to, I'll probably put a little something up here linking to our deep dive on Shilajit, which is a great source of fulvic acid, which is excellent for activating some of these detox pathways as well.
Definitely. One of my favorite ingredients now.
Yeah. And, I think they're really synergistic. The combination of the two is probably, highly desirable, I would say. I take both of them every day, personally. Yeah,
both are Raisanas and Ayurveda. But ashwagandha, of course, steals the show, generally speaking, because it's the flagship herb of Ayurveda and often referred to as King of Adaptogens. And, people see that and then they all run that direction. But there's a lot of other wonderful ingredients derived from Ayurveda, which Natrion specializes in, that are very interesting, to say the least, when it comes to their various beneficial health effects.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see here. We went over detox. We went over a little bit about immunity. Maybe we could elaborate a bit more on immunity and some of the research there.
Sure. Well, as far as immunity goes, I'm not thinking of a lot of direct evidence. But again, going back to knowing how prolonged elevations in cortisol as part of that physiologic stress response has very detrimental effects on immune function, and it suppresses immune functions. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, over time, this can make you more susceptible to insults that your immune system would typically help with. And so, again, an adaptogen is gonna help with balance, right? And so we've already said stress leads to imbalance within the body. And you had a great comment recently about, the dynamic environment of changing circumstances. So our body's always trying to maintain what we call as homeostasis or balance, right? And there's many factors, both internally and externally, that cause imbalances. And then, of course, the body's trying to restore balance in the face of all these changing circumstances, like stress. And so the imbalance can lead to dysfunction, and restoration of balance is critical to restore and maintain health. That's what the adaptogens are essentially doing. So ashwagandha being something that helps reduce excessive stress, right? Reduce excessive cortisol production, helps counterbalance the negative effects of cortisol signaling. That's going to benefit the immune system. And also what we just talked about is supporting the body's internal antioxidant defenses. I think if you asked someone off the street, hey, what supplements are good for immune function? One of the first ones you'll hear is vitamin C. Well, why is vitamin C so important? Because it's an antioxidant. And when you have an immune response, the immune system relies heavily on the antioxidant system to support expansion of proliferation of cells. They produce a lot of oxidants as necessary for part of their activity, but of course they need to protect themselves too. I remind people that there's always some collateral damage, so to say, when you have these immune responses in the body. And so the body wants to limit that collateral damage, and by supporting your antioxidant defenses or taking in large amounts of dietary antioxidants like vitamin C and E and some other ones seem to support immune function. So glutathione is very supportive of immune function, right?
Exactly.
And the cells can be quickly depleted of that glutathione during an immune response. Vitamin C helps recycling, but there's other factors that you want to support recycling and production of glutathione to support that ongoing immune response.
Right. I've seen there's research where they'll measure the ratio of, oxidized and reduced glutathione, or basically, simply put, which glutathione is, how much of it is usable, right, versus non-usable in T cells. And their efficacy is directly proportionate, to how much usable glutathione is available to them. So glutathione is, by some accounts, it's like almost like a master immunomodulator. It has huge effects on, they call the Th1, Th2 balance, which won't go too much down a rabbit hole there, but very, very critical for the immune system. And so many of the ingredients that CHOQ uses do have some degree of effect on glutathione. It's huge. I mean, we have our Apex Glutathione product, which is tailor-made for that. But when you look at everything else that we carry, many of our products have at least some kind of effect on these pathways like NRF2, which then, increase glutathione recycling or synthesis or, something like that. So, very cool. Another really big one. I'd like to get back to brain and sleep for a second. Obviously, we talked about cortisol and the importance of stress, healthy stress chemistry. I know that, so it seems to improve sleep. It seems to reduce sleep onset latency. Ashwagandha does. Let's dive into that for a second. That's a fun one. And very, I'm sure for so many people, I mean, I myself, I think too much at night, and so I have to do breathing techniques and take the right supplements sometimes. And I don't have maybe the worst insomnia in the world, but stuff like this is relevant to me as well. So how is ashwagandha helping with healthy sleep?
So again, we know that like you had mentioned, signaling in the brain or an overactive brain can contribute to restlessness and sleeplessness. I suffer from the same thing. I need to practice meditation techniques, things to kind of get my brain to slow down, calm down from all the activity of the day, the stress that we all face daily, right? And to remind everybody, cortisol is not something that's just kind of in the system at a stable level. It cycles daily and it peaks shortly, in the morning. So it helps drive the body to wakefulness and prime it to be active and, get the brain going, get the activities going. So it's important for part of the sleep-wake cycle too. And people that often have sleep disruption or disturbances have dysregulated cortisol rhythms. And so their cortisol levels are elevated at later points in the day, so higher in like, in the afternoon and evening when they're supposed to be coming down to prime the body for sleep. Exactly. And so we know that chronic stress is typically associated with sleeplessness and insomnia, and of course that affects every body system, including the functionality of your brain. And so by not getting enough sleep, you're going to have lack of energy, your mood's going to be disturbed, irritable. Everybody knows what it's like to be around someone that hasn't slept, and it's not fun. And it's one of the primary concerns in our population right now.
Yeah, and I don't remember the actual technical nomenclature for this, but I do remember reading a while back that there's a certain process by which our brain removes metabolic waste that can only happen during deep sleep.
Right.
I also tell people, in coaching, I say, basically, if you're not getting enough sleep, it means that you have trash accumulating in your brain, Yeah.
That's exactly right. I'm forgetting the exact name of it too, but it's something along the lines of where there's no traditional lymphatic system for draining the tissue in the brain. And what happens at night during sleep is that the cells actually will shrink, and there'll be more liquid around them, and waste will be removed and come out. But of course, if you don't have sleep, then you're not removing this cellular waste, and it accumulates. And of course, once it accumulates, it becomes toxic. And I would remind everyone, because healthy cognitive aging is a top concern for Americans as an aging population. We're living longer, but we're spending more years in diminished health states, and we're losing our cognitive capacity, which can it underlies all of our perception of well-being, right? And so, the central nervous system and brain has very limited antioxidant defenses, right? And also it's a tissue that doesn't really rejuvenate, like maybe a liver or some other tissues, right? Like the digestive tract. So when you lose it, it doesn't come back, you know? And so you really want to protect those cells, right? By reducing the insult that is leading to oxidative stress or excessive inflammation or anything that would negatively affect the cells. But also you need to restore and provide adequate defenses to those cells. And like you said, glutathione is probably first and foremost. So supporting endogenous antioxidant defenses, but also some external antioxidants are very important. The brain, I always remind people, 60% fat. And so certain antioxidants vitamin E, but even more, I would say something like tocotrienols, those family members of vitamin E, or xanthophyll carotenoids like lutein, zeaxanthin, astaxanthin. These are very important antioxidants for your brain. But also, again, you want to reduce the stimulus, i.e., all that chronic stress that's causing the problem in the first place. So think about that 1-2 punch of something like an adaptogen like ashwagandha that will also support internal antioxidant defenses, but then a formula that's designed to restore and feed that system, that antioxidant defense system, restore glutathione and support the functions of glutathione in the body. And so you have an antioxidant network, vitamin C, vitamin E, CoQ10, but at the center of that system is glutathione. And so you really want to play both of those angles to really protect your brain as you age.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, we mentioned meditation for a second, as being something that's helpful for sleep and, helpful for a million different reasons. For those of y'all who are watching who enjoy meditation, taking adaptogens, especially those that help to work on healthy cortisol levels, highly synergistic with meditation. I'm drinking holy basil right now, which is another Ayurvedic herb that also is profoundly effective when it comes to regulating cortisol levels. And in Ayurveda, it is commonly drunk to open the third eye and support meditation. Just to kind of, bring it back for a second to the more classical perspective here, we always like to try to honor the traditions that have existed for thousands of years, while at the same time, geeking out about all the science and finding that balance there. I also I found a rat study that said that it boosts BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor. I don't know, if that's the only one, and if the evidence is super solid, but I was wondering, is that something that could be secondary to just helping sleep? Does you know? I don't know. I wonder.
The study's not coming to mind. I know it's not one of our preclinical studies.
Right,
but,
not one of yours, yeah.
But BDNF, as you mentioned, it's associated as a protective factor for the brain, for neurons, so nerve cells. Yeah. Very, very protective. So it's being used, I know, as a biomarker, and things that elevate levels of BDNF in the body are generally perceived of as beneficial at this point, right? And so if it is having a positive impact on that, then I could say it's very likely supporting cognitive functions and brain health.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. Here's another fun one. I saw at least one study. I don't think I have it here, but it might have been one of yours. Tell me if it is, where there were some positive effects on hemoglobin as well.
You know, and so in that stress study, it's funny, people often might not think about this, but when you have elevated levels of inflammation in the body, and it doesn't have to be like during an immune response, that's very different than, say, just chronic low-grade inflammation associated with aging and metabolic dysregulation, but it has a negative effect on body iron balance, which is critical to producing the protein hemoglobin, because hemoglobin uses iron to carry oxygen throughout the body, right? So every cell needs oxygen to function adequately, and hemoglobin is what delivers that to the cells. And so by indirectly supporting body iron balance, you can improve hemoglobin status. And this is one reason why with chronic stress or conditions characterized by oxidative stress and excessive inflammation, you can have a negative effect on hemoglobin status. And the number one cause of diminished hemoglobin is diminished iron levels. That's the number one reason throughout the world.
Yeah.
So you want to improve iron balance, and people often think, well, I'll just supplement iron. But it's not so simple, because it's regulated, and the point of regulation in the body is at the site of absorption. And if you take high amounts of iron, it can have a counterproductive effect and actually lead to problems and not resolve the issue. And so, this is an indirect way of supporting the body's absorption of iron. If the body needs more iron, it usually gets better at absorbing it, so it will pull it out of your diet a little better. Yeah. But this will help with the regulation of iron in the body, and therefore may have a positive impact on hemoglobin status. And of course, if you follow the biology, that of course could translate to physical and mental performance, because if your iron status is compromised,
oxygenation cells.
Even before you see a drop in hemoglobin, one of the first signs of diminished iron is kind of lethargy, like low energy, poor focus. So you can indirectly have a beneficial effect on body iron balance by supporting the body's internal healthy immune or healthy inflammatory response and endogenous antioxidant defenses.
Yeah, and that reminds me, there's a little known mechanism. I'm shocked by how few people have heard of this, but the iron withholding system, whereby, because iron can feed, let's just say, it can feed microorganisms that are counterproductive, right? And so your macrophages can actually trap iron and pull them out of the blood on purpose, right? Knowing that it's going to lead to perhaps deficiency in hemoglobin, but it's okay because it's worth it for trying to restore balance to the total microbiome. Just to put it as gently as I can. So I'm wondering if that's factoring in here.
Absolutely. So you said it perfectly, because iron is critical to most all living organisms, particularly microbes, good and bad ones. In fact, for the bad ones, it's requisite for their virulence often. And so they want it. And what does the body do when it thinks there's, an infection? It wants to withhold iron. And so it pulls it out of the blood. It holds it, like you said, in some of these innate immune cells like macrophages. It holds it in the liver, and it discourages absorption from the gut, so from your diet. And in doing so, we call this body iron delocalization. So,
new term.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
See, I always learn something new talking to you. Yeah, cool. So
the primary storage protein for iron in the body is one called ferritin, but it's also known as what we call an acute phase protein. So it increases during inflammatory responses, and that's to bind up all this iron, because it doesn't want to let the microbes get the iron. And as we just talked about with supplementation, I see a lot of these iron supplements, which I have many thoughts on, but I would never supplement high dose iron, particularly as an iron salt like ferrous fumarate, ferrous sulfate, which you see in the most.
Is the worst.
So imagine if you're taking 50 milligrams of elemental iron in that form, it dissociates, meaning it's no longer a salt, and you have a free iron ion, which mediates the generation of reactive oxygen species. Now, this can, of course, cause gastrointestinal upset, and does often. It can lead to irritation in the gut, inflammation. And if you think that the body, and in reality, the body's, even if it needs iron, it's only going to absorb maybe a couple to a few milligrams at best. Mm-hmm. So if you take 50 milligrams, most of that is just going to move through your GI tract, wreak havoc along the way. And like you said, it's going to feed bad bugs. And we don't want that. So it doesn't seem like a good approach to resolve poor body iron status. One is you want to basically remove the brakes, right? So restore balance to that system so that those tissues are not hoarding it, right? And it thinks it has to if there's a state of excess inflammation. And so by helping resolve that and restoring a healthy inflammatory response, you're going to improve body iron status. And of course, that may indirectly benefit your energy levels, your focus, and your mood, right? Because you have improved oxygen carrying capacity throughout your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oxygen's pretty important. If you think it's not, then, hold your breath for a few minutes and see what happens. That's really cool. That's just a little, public service announcement for our viewers, that sometimes more iron's not always the answer. So when you're going to shop for supplements, and you just think, I just need more and more and more iron, I'm just not taking enough. Maybe consult with some kind of practitioner and who knows what they're doing. And sometimes it's not the answer, although iron is certainly important, but sometimes your body's purposely not absorbing it and purposely sequestering it, to try to protect you. And that's just that's a fact that I just feel good about letting people know about, because it's just not enough people, know about that one. So let's see, what have we not covered yet? It's funny. For some reason, I found some people called it the King of Ayurveda. Some people called it the Queen of Ayurveda. And I was like, why is that? Why would it be a king or a queen? Again, I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. But I was wondering if, when I saw queen, I thought of emphasizing the yin aspects of sensoril and of ashwagandha, being that, on a more yin level, right, it has a calming and centering effect, right? So it's not a stimulant per se, but on the yang level, it does help with things like, which we'll get to in a second, things like, healthy adrenal function and testosterone, things like that, and energy levels. So overall, to me, it seems very well balanced as an herb. Yeah. I'm not familiar with all the ways that Ayurveda characterizes it. It's not part of the Chinese medicine pharmacopoeia, but if it were, I would say it probably wouldn't be excessively warming or cooling. It seems like it would be kind of in the middle. Seems like a very well balanced herb to me. What do you think about? I'm sure you've tried your fair share of adaptogens. To me, it strikes me as one that just about anybody can take, because it's not too much in one direction over something else. It seems like it has a very wide appeal.
Yeah, I've heard lots of names. One name I have heard is King of Adaptogens. So maybe Queen of Ayurveda, but Ayurveda has lots of botanical options. It is one of the flagship herbs of Ayurveda, so no doubt. We do know the queen is most important, don't we? Look at chess, right?
Sure.
But as an adaptogen goes, it's probably among the most well-recognized adaptogens. And personally for me, I find it the most helpful for me personally, again, because I'm someone that deals with a lot of regular stress, which manifests into kind of like issues with sleep. And so I find that it's very helpful for me. Now, one thing I would caution is that, we've been talking about primarily ashwagandha in general, but ashwagandha is a plant. And there's many products out there that have the term ashwagandha on it and are sold and you can buy. So, I would just want to remind everyone that Ayurveda, this holistic healing system that originated in the Indian subcontinent thousands and thousands of years ago and still practiced to this day, is like most traditional medicines based primarily on experience. So often lacking in the kind of documentation or systemic evaluation that we'd see today, for evidence-based medicine. So I always feel like, it's always good to blend experience-based medicine with evidence-based medicine, right? And so now we have modern scientific tools to dive deeper into understanding what is in the plant, what is behind some of these biological activities. And first, there's a diverse array of phytochemical metabolites within the plant, and they're contained in all parts of the plant. So the root has probably been used most commonly traditionally. However, it should be noted the seeds, the stems, the fruits, the leaves, these are all sources of these health promoting compounds. And in fact, the leaves is a primary site of where they're made. And so of course tend to be a very rich source. In fact, a much richer source than the roots are actually for many of the most desirable health promoting compounds, at least that we know of at this point. And so there wasn't a ton of clinical research. There's much more preclinical in recent past, but Natreon, as one of the ingredient suppliers for their branded sensual ashwagandha, which again, it's a unique 100% water extract derived from equal parts of ashwagandha roots and ashwagandha leaves. And so it's no other ashwagandha ingredient is like that on the market. Others may use different solvents to try to extract different chemical constituents. Others may use only the root or other parts of the plant. We have a patent on ours, so no one can replicate what we do. And ours was specifically formulated in part to optimize that benefits for stress, resilience, and adaptation, right? And so this is one of the reasons why they developed this one. And so Sensoril, as the first branded ashwagandha ingredient available in the U.S., it preceded, I think, the second one by nearly a decade. And so it has been around the longest. It has the established record of safe and effective use within the population. It's also backed by toxicity studies and clinical studies. And it was a trailblazer in a lot of the ashwagandha clinical research. I think if you start looking at the references for beneficial effects of ashwagandha, you'll find studies using Sensoril or maybe one of these other branded ashwagandha ingredients. It's not necessarily just some generic ashwagandha powder that you can buy offline. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying those aren't great. I actually get ashwagandha root powder and use myself. But I use our Sensoril as well, being a unique ashwagandha ingredient. And I just want to remind, these are botanicals. Botanicals it's not as if you have the same chemical constituent, right? So this can vary based on the chemotype or genotype of the plant, where it's grown, the environmental conditions, when it's harvested, what stage of maturation the plant is in. And so we have a very controlled process that they use. They want to use the same chemotype and genotype grown in specific regions, right? And it allows us to get a consistent composition of our ingredient, right? And ours is standardized to a few bioactives to ensure a consistent composition. Now, natural botanicals, they vary in their composition. And of course, it's the composition, these chemical constituents that dictate the biological activity, therefore their health promoting potential. And I just want to make sure people don't conflate all of these different ashwagandha ingredients. And a testament to Sensoril ashwagandha is the fact that it has the lowest substantiated effective dose. You see benefits
125 milligrams, right?
At only 125, and typically you see the benefits,
impressive. Which is one fourth of what we use. One quarter of what's in this you have research on, which is pretty substantial for an herbal extract, really. You were that research that we started off with, it showed a dose response more or less, and so the amount in your product is likely going to result in augmented benefits than you'd see at a lower dose. Absolutely.
And of course, most of the other studies of other ashwagandha ingredients used higher amounts of ashwagandha to even realize any benefit. And so, we have a very effective ingredient, and you are providing among the most potent doses available commercially. Right. So I think people
can
the
organic
be very
version as well. The organic.
Exactly. We offer conventional organic, right? They have the same composition, so you can expect the same results. But of course, the organic comes with a premium because people want that organic.
And you know, if you're out there and you're getting on Amazon or on the internet or whatever, and you're shopping around for a Sensoril, you're not going to find an organic one at this dose anywhere but at CHOQ.com. It's just not going to happen. And of course, whenever CHOQ is given the chance, if we have two versions of something that are equally good, with the exception of one being organic, we'll always pick the organic, even though it's more expensive every single time.
Yep.
You know, and one of the reasons that our formulas are not the cheapest is because we use research-based, oftentimes wildcrafted and/or organic, if possible, trademarked ingredients that are standardized. And I'm glad you brought up standardization. You know, a lot of people don't even know the difference between a raw herb and an extracted one. You know, and just for those of y'all who might not be familiar with how this works, you know, you can take a raw herb and you can extract it, and you can make the extract up to sometimes over 100 times more potent. Now, a lot of these that we'll find are more commonly 4-to-1, 5-to-1, 10-to-1. Our Tomcat 100 product is a 100-to-1 Tomcat Ali extract. I believe Sensoril is it a 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, right?
It's a 5-to-1.
5-to-1, yeah. So 5-to-1, just, you know, the simple math there is if you had 1,000 milligrams of the extract, it would be like 5,000 milligrams equivalent of the raw powder, right? But when you're shopping around, you know, if you're like, oh, well, I can buy a kilogram of ashwagandha for only, you know, $60 or something like that. Well, that's not extracted. You know, it's going to be harder for your body to absorb. And at the same time, you're not going to get the clinical research behind it, and it's not going to be standardized. The standardization process ensures that there's a minimum number of bioactive phytochemicals in every single batch, right? And of course, so, you know, yeah, you are going to pay for that, but your results are going to be a lot more consistent. And of course, you know, having the right labs done for to make sure there's an acceptably low level of contaminants like lead and things like that, microbes testing, all that, right? Which of course CHOQ does extensively, and so does Natreon. That's also really important. So, you know, caveat emptor with herbs, and when you're just buying random bulk raw herbs off the internet, you have to be a little bit careful.
You know, Matt, I'll say this too. You had mentioned the highest level of the organic. As far as I know, consumers will not find a higher dose of Sensoril offered, conventional or organic, in any formula that's currently commercially available than in the CHOQ product. So you were giving them the most potent dose of Sensoril ashwagandha available.
Yep. When I was talking it over with the CHOQ team, and we were talking about launching this product, I was like, let's do one that's stronger than everybody else's. That's just how CHOQ rolls, you know. And we're, you know, obviously it's substantiated by the research, and we know that it's a safe dose. But let's make it stronger than everybody else's and organic. So so you know, not only is it stronger, but it's also certified organic. So the ingredient is. So I feel good about that. That's just how we like to do it, you know. So let's see, what else do I have here? Wow, we went through a lot. We talked about ashwagandha's effects on immunity, stress, focus, healthy inflammation response, antioxidants. We didn't talk as much, we haven't yet hit on its effects on things like healthy hormone levels.
Right.
So maybe we could hit on that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is an area that it's commonly recognized for. In fact, it's probably the premier health tonic for supporting men's health in Ayurveda. The name ashwagandha translates loosely, I think, to, you know, horse smell or smell of horse, right? And this is in reference to both the smell of the raw root, you know, but also the purported benefit of utilizing ashwagandha, as it's purported to give you the strength, vitality, and vigor of a horse. And this often refers to virility as well, right? And so it's often used as an aphrodisiac to support fertility in both men and women. And why is that? Well, remember we were talking about the HPA axis and cortisol secretion. Well, you know, cortisol is a steroid hormone. And it's so all steroid hormones, just like your sex hormones, testosterone, estrogens, and also prednisone, those are all derived from the same master precursor, and that's pregnenolone, right? And so if you're producing excessive amounts of cortisol, well, you're stealing away that master precursor that now can no longer be used to produce the sex hormones, right?
Makes sense.
And so you'll see people that are chronically stressed often face issues with fertility or maybe decreased libido, and their levels of testosterone and estrogen are often compromised or reduced. And so by improving that hormonal balance in the body and reducing that excessive cortisol, we'll often see improvements in levels of testosterone and estrogen in men and women. And a common concern I see, which I think is ill-founded, is that women will often see something like ashwagandha's benefit for improving testosterone levels as a negative, like, oh, well, I don't want my testosterone levels to go up. Look, when it comes to the biological machinery of how the body makes estrogen, it's one step away from testosterone. The body has to make testosterone to make estrogen. Right. And so women produce testosterone, and then from that testosterone, they produce estrogen. And often women that face fertility issues, they're often characterized by lower levels of testosterone too.
Right.
And so those things are governed within the body and regulated. It's not like, oh, a woman's going to take ashwagandha and her testosterone's going to shoot up, but her estrogen's not going to improve. No. The estrogen will likely improve. Testosterone will be regulated within a normal range, but hopefully in a healthier range than you were prior. Again, it's an adaptogen. Right. And so both men and women can see improvements in hormone balance with the use of ashwagandha because of those adaptogenic properties and how these hormones are produced in the body.
Yeah, that's a great point. I actually did find a piece of research. I'm not sure if I have it here, just a jumble of papers on my desk, but that they did show that it supported healthy testosterone levels in men, but not women. I mean, in the sense of it did not like drastically increase testosterone for women, is what I'm trying to say, right? And that is really important to know. So, because, obviously sometimes if you start talking about raising testosterone, then women might get a little bit spooked by that. But as you mentioned, obviously there is a range that both men and women need to be in. The range is like this for women and, like this for men, right? But I do wonder also if one of the reasons perhaps that we do find problems with that in women, it might have to do with the xenoestrogens floating around potentially, making women more estrogenic because we have these compounds like BPA and also some of these pesticides that are interfering with the female endocrine system. So just to kind of link it back to toxicity and why having a clean lifestyle is so important for your endocrine system to keep these endocrine disrupting molecules out of your system. But so what you were saying is, am I right to say, is it aromatase that converts?
That's right. That's the enzyme that converts testosterone to estrogen. And so there's drugs out there that are called aromatase inhibitors, and this is to discourage that transition. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, in a sense, perhaps it might, in a woman's system, the testosterone, if it goes up, it'll just get converted to estrogen, is what you're saying. Because that enzyme will be probably working differently in a woman's system than it would in a man's system, I would imagine, because the system requires more estrogen.
Right, and it's not, again, ashwagandha is not working to just drive testosterone production. That's not how it's working. Again, it's relieving the negative influence of the dysregulated HPA axis or HPG axis is the other one, which is the hypothalamus, pituitary, and then your gonads, the reproductive tissues, because those are producing, at least in women, high levels of estrogen, right? And so cortisol will negatively feed back to reduce the signaling in that cascade, and of course you're going to get less production of testosterone and estrogen. But by relieving that break, so to say, doesn't just mean it accelerates and you produce more. It will still only produce the amounts with which your body is demanding naturally, right? So you're basically going from imbalance or insufficient levels into a healthy range, but not into an excessive range. So, and I think a lot of people often, the reason they have these misconceptions is because they hear stories about administration of exogenous androgens like anabolic steroids or estrogen.
Totally different ballgame, yeah.
Yeah, so if a man injects high levels of testosterone, they'll see more of that converted to estrogen, and you can see some ill effects of that. Or some of those anabolic steroids are not converted to estrogen, but because of the negative feedback in the signaling, it will shut off the body's internal production of testosterone, i.e. also estrogen. And of course, no estrogen in a man is also bad, and that can lead to fatigue and other issues well, right? So it's like too much, not good. Too little, also not good. We want to be in balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the perception of safety and how much of the environment is a threat, right, has a direct effect on fertility, which makes sense, right? So if the woman, for example, if a woman is like, let's just go back to thousands of years ago, right? So let's say if the organism is detecting that there's a lot of threats outside, then that signals that it's not a good time to have a child, right? Because that child is going to possibly be eaten, right? So in a sense, that stress hormone cascade is part of the intelligence at work, ensuring that pregnancy is going to happen during a time when the woman is most likely to actually be safe.
Yeah.
Right? So and so it's important also to know that there is a wisdom at work here, and there is there's evolutionary biological rationale behind a lot of this stuff, and it makes a lot more sense when you start to think of it in these terms.
I don't think evolution really cares much about your happiness or feelings. All it cares about is the propagation of your genetic material, right? And so it wants to optimize the conditions with which to do that. And then obviously after you do that, it wants to help you stay around long enough to get your progeny on their way. But you're not so useful after that point.
Sure, yeah. And also it's important to note too that, it's not just about, when we talk about fertility, it's not just about, whether you're trying to have children or not. It also it's just a general marker for vitality, for overall vitality, right?
Right.
If you have good fertility, it's kind of an indication that a lot of things are going right in your body in multiple different systems, I would say.
That's right. And again, we've been talking a lot about cortisol today. I was explaining how cortisol will affect the signaling from the brain down to the gonads to reduce estrogen production in women or testosterone production in men. But also cortisol has a direct negative effect on the functionality of reproductive organs themselves. And so, it's really a double whammy, right? So you have cortisol wreaking havoc. And just like you said, if you tie that into an evolutionary perspective, remember we talked about the acute stress response, running away from a saber-toothed tiger, digestion's not so important. Well, reproduction's also not so important at that moment, right? It's not the time that your body wants to prioritize fertility and those functions, right? It's saying, hey, we're going to put that on hold and reprioritize these body systems to deal with this existential threat. Once we resolve that, then we'll get back to this. But the problem is this isn't being resolved either because poor resolution in our body or chronic repeated bouts of stress. Again, it's not a saber-toothed tiger, right? Maybe it's an imminent deadline at work. Maybe you're not eating the healthiest or whatever family stressors, right? But the perception of stress is evoking a similar biological response. And you can see why constantly stimulating that acute stress response is detrimental to overall health, and you're going to see dysfunction in all of these body systems, be it cardiovascular, metabolic, immune, digestive, you name it.
Yeah, and when people hear things like, if you're scrolling on Instagram and you see a meme that says something like thoughts can make you sick or they can heal you, you might think, oh, that's just some sort of hippy-dippy metaphysical garbage. But actually it's literally true, because the thoughts, they evoke, there are signals coming from your brain to your various glands that are regulating your cortisol secretion, that are regulating your production of sex hormones, and that it was all initiated by thoughts, by perceptions.
That's right.
So it's absolutely true in a totally scientifically accurate way, I believe, to say that 100%.
Sure. I mean, and if you think the opposite too, where it's like you can say you look at a person that you're attracted to. Sometimes that will stimulate increased levels of testosterone, say in a man, like a little more testosterone secretion, and so there's all these underlying biological mechanisms related to our evolution, right? And of course we're trying to figure them out in the context of our modern society, right, which is highly dynamic and we're manipulating our environment so extensively that we don't always know, be it BPA in plastics or all these other excess light at night, all these different things that perturb our body systems. And the nice thing about something like an adaptogen, it's a non-specific response that's just enhancing the body's ability to adapt to stress. And that could be physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, and also, of course, helping that resolution process. So restoring normal physiologic function to those organ systems, which shifted their metabolic processes, became imbalanced, but ideally to deal with an acute stressor. And so, you need that resolution or else your health will become compromised.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting from a lifestyle perspective just to see all the different ways that we deal with stress that are counterproductive, right? So somebody has a really stressful day. The tendency sometimes is to eat a pizza and drink a bottle of wine, and no judgment there. We've all done it at some point, but at the same time, just know that the reason you want to have things like adaptogens in your life, one of the main reasons is because you actually make better decisions when you're not stressed out. Because when you get stressed out, not only are you not thinking as clearly, right? Your thinking is definitely hazier. Your reasoning is not as good, but you're going to reach for things that are oftentimes, in order to compensate for your poor mood, that are oftentimes going to down the line just cause more problems.
That's right.
So yeah. So that's just look at adaptogens like ashwagandha as a driver of good decisions in a sense.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, we often make bad decisions, to alleviate symptoms, be it alcohol or poor diet. Maybe we'll overindulge on the treats. We'll feel good for a moment, right? But then, of course, we feel worse in the long run, and it only exacerbates all those physiologic problems that manifest from the excess stress. Remember, it's like, I don't think guzzling down alcohol and sugar is going to have a positive impact on your blood sugar, right, or blood lipid levels, which are already being negatively impacted by the stress, right? And so,
exactly, yeah.
Ever since I was a kid, there was research associating type A personalities with adverse, cardiovascular events, right? Yeah, and it was a stronger association than most anything else. So we know how bad stress is, particularly for your heart. But I've heard
that association actually. Yeah.
It's bad for pretty much everything. So, we didn't talk a lot about the cardiovascular system, but certainly bad for your heart, but it's bad for your brain, it's bad for your mood, it's bad for your immune health, it's bad for your digestive health, it's bad for all of these things. Yeah. And so we need, and again, people think that maybe we need drugs to eliminate stress. I don't want to be stressed, right? Look, you're not going to eliminate stressors in this world. You need to become better adapted at dealing with those stressors, right? So rather than say, oh my God, I just want to remove all these stressors from my life and blunt my body's ability to feel stress. No, you want to make your body more resilient to the stress both mentally and physically. And I think adaptogens like ashwagandha do that. And then you have Sensoril as a specific ashwagandha ingredient that's supported by a variety of clinical studies that highlight its adaptogenic properties in various ways, be it attenuating the negative effects of stress on the cardiovascular system or the detox pathways, or just reducing the experienced symptoms of stress, right? So the way it affects our mood and our behavior. So you have this clinically supported ingredient from an experience-based therapeutic approach in ashwagandha as a foremost adaptogen. So I think it's worth a try for many people that haven't found success with say other approaches to deal with it. But certainly I would also caution it's no silver bullet. There are no silver bullets, right?
Of course,
you still need to practice a healthy lifestyle, right? So your diet. I think the world of meditation now, I need to do more of it, but it's something I'm trying to incorporate more and more. Yeah. And give yourself some downtime. Give yourself some time to wind down before bed. You're not going to take ashwagandha right before bed and be like, I'm in chill mode. It's probably going to be better over time when you use it regularly to help balance out your system and engage in those things. Try to get good sleep because you need all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes at CHOQ, we tend to recommend 90 days of a nice stack even if it's a single product, but, we like to, our products are really designed to be in stacks, 2, 3, 4 products together. And 90 days is a good fair shake to see if something can really, really impact you. Sometimes it's not till you stop taking something that you really realize, though. So
right.
I've definitely had people where they're like, I don't know if it's doing anything. After they take it for 2 months, they stop. Then 2 weeks later, they're like, wait a second. No, it was actually changing my life. It just did it so gradually over such a long period of time, I couldn't quite tell.
Yeah.
Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you again. I just want to say really fast, if you'd like to get 35% off of an ashwagandha subscription or half off of a single purchase, this guy right here, check out the comments for some coupon codes. Pretty substantial discount there. That's 35% off subscription or half off just single purchase on our 600 milligram organic sensory ashwagandha. And I'm sure we'll have some more of these in the future. If you want to check out, another one with the two of us and also Dr. Sani from Natreon, we've got a great deep dive on Shilajit where we go super in depth for close to an hour or so on that. Anything else you'd like to add before we head out?
No, hey, I'd like to encourage your listeners, try it, guys. I really do think it can have a lot of benefits. I personally use it, and I use it at that higher dosing of 500 plus milligrams a day, and I also like using it with that Prima V Shilajit that we talked about. 2 of my favorites from our ingredient line, and 2 that I personally use and seen a lot of benefits personally for. I know that's anecdotal, but you know what? I see all the clinical evidence saying it works, and so that's reassuring. Safe, efficacious. Right. Good for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Shilajit, highly synergistic with ashwagandha. We have hundreds of 5-star reviews on our website. Very, very popular product. So check out the deep dive on Shilajit and then maybe get them both and try them for a little while. You probably will not regret it. Yeah.
And hey, great for women too. We have new research coming out in postmenopausal women. Lots of benefits for both mood, bone health, both the Shilajit and the ashwagandha. Again, some people may think they're primarily for men. They're not. They do have positive effects on testosterone, but they'll have positive effects on hormone balance in both men and women.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Thomas. This was fantastic. And I'm sure we'll get to do it again sometime in the near future.
Hey, I look forward to the next one, Matt.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody, and stay human.